So I want to talk about something I've been noticing for a very long time, which is just how mad people get over what someone else's favorite Zelda game is. Like, genuinely mad. Not just like disagreeing and move on, but more like personally offended that someone sees things differently than them. And I think it's worth talking about because the reason people fight about this so much isn't actually that anyone's wrong, it's that there isn't a wrong answer to begin with. And I don't think people actually think about that enough to change how they argue. Here's the thing about Zelda specifically. More than almost any other series I can think of, every mainline game is doing something completely different. Ocarina of Time isn't trying to be the same experience as Wind Waker. Wind Waker isn't trying to be the same experience as Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild sure as hell isn't trying to be the same experience as Skyward Sword. So when you ask what's the best Zelda, you're not actually comparing one thing against itself, but you're comparing a bunch of different design philosophies and hoping one of them wins outright. And it's not going to because they're not even trying to do the same job. And I think something like Skyward Sword versus Breath of the Wild is honestly the clearest example of this, because they're about as far apart as two 3D games in the series can be, while technically still being the same franchise. If Skyward Sword is your favorite, you probably love the story of it, you love the atmosphere, you love how it's a little more linear, you love the intricate dungeons, and if you tell that person Breath of the Wild is your favorite, some of them will genuinely look at you like you've lost it, like you picked the open world checklist game over the one with an actual personality. But flip it around and ask a Breath of the Wild fan why they love it, they'll say something like the freedom, the abilities, the sheer amount of content. Neither one of those people is wrong, but they're just telling you what they personally want out of a Zelda game, and those wants don't always overlap as much as people pretend they do. Like, it's perfectly fine to have a preference of how you want a Zelda game to play. And we'll get back to that later, but I also want to talk about ranking videos specifically, because unlike just having a conversation with someone or seeing something in a thread, people are watching these ranking videos for entertainment. Like, they're all focusing on one person who's giving their opinions on the series. Like, if I say in a comment that Wind Waker's my favorite, there's probably not going to be too many people who care. But if I put out a video ranking every Zelda game and Wind Waker's a number one, suddenly that's going to be a hot take, it's going to be bait, suddenly there's a guy in the comments asking how I could possibly put it above Ocarina of Time, like I've committed some crime against humanity. And I think part of what happens is that a ranking format makes disagreement feel more personal than it actually is. Because you're not just saying you like something, but you're putting it above something someone else loves, and that makes people feel like their favorite just lost an argument and never actually had. Which is why ranking videos get their reputation for being rage bait, even when the person making them is completely sincere. I'm not putting a game at the bottom because I want a reaction, I'm putting it there because that's generally where it is for me. But the format itself kind of guarantees some percentage of the audience is going to take it as a personal attack regardless of how it's presented. So if that's all true, if there really isn't a correct answer here, then it raises kind of an obvious question. Why does anyone care this much what a stranger in a YouTube comment or a stranger in a YouTube video actually thinks about this series? Because that's really what this is most of the time. It's not your friends, it's not someone whose opinion actually shapes your life in any way. It's some random guy you'll probably never hear from again, who has a different opinion on the series that you love. Like, that shouldn't be enough to make you want to write an essay or actually feel anger. And I think part of it is that liking something this much makes it feel personal in a way that's hard to separate from your own taste. Like, if someone says the game is bad, it kind of feels like they're saying you have bad taste, even though that's not actually what's happening. Another part of it, honestly, is just that arguing online is addictive in a way that has nothing to do with Zelda specifically for a lot of people. You get a notification, somebody's wrong in the internet, and that's like you need to just go solve it. But none of that energy is actually about the game anymore. You could spend that same hour replaying whatever game you're defending, and you probably enjoy your life more than arguing with someone you're never going to convince, who's typing back at you from a phone line in a grocery store and forgetting about the whole conversation in an hour anyway. There's also something about typing that makes people meaner than they'd actually be in person. You've probably heard the term keyboard warrior, and it is very accurate. No one's gonna walk up to someone who says Skyward Sword is their favorite Zelda and tell them they have objectively bad taste and should reconsider their entire relationship with the franchise. But the anonymity of the internet and the fact that you're just writing something instead of actually talking makes people forget there's a human on the other end, and also gives them the confidence to say things they wouldn't say in person. And a lot of this, if you actually look where the nastiest arguments come from, it traces back to when someone started playing the series. People whose first Zelda was Ocarina of Time or Wind Waker grew up with a certain idea of what these games are supposed to feel like. The dungeons, the items, the structure, finding a new tool and immediately using it to solve the next 10 puzzles. And then Breath of the Wild comes along and throws a lot of that out, and for some longtime fans, that hurt because they just didn't like that formula. Meanwhile, you've got a whole generation of fans whose first Zelda was Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, and for them the open world is just what Zelda is. They didn't lose anything because they never had it to begin with, so when older fans talk about missing the traditional dungeon structure, it might land more as gatekeeping to them, if like they're being told that their first experience with the series doesn't count as much as someone else's. And I think both these have valid points buried in, but the point is that they're not listening to the other person's perspective. They're just going to defend the version of Zelda that they happen to like. Like, if you find someone who's 16 years old, and his first Zelda game was Breath of the Wild, and then he played Tears of the Kingdom, and that's what he prefers in the series, and then he interacts with someone who's been playing the series forever, like played the original Zelda, and he might prefer A Link to the Past. Instead of trying to understand where they're both coming from, and have a discussion about what they like about each of those games, it often just turns into shouting and prove that the other person is an idiot, or nostalgia blind, or too young. And I just think these are pointless conversations. Because once people get locked into that mode, they're not going to argue about the game anymore, and they're going to just try to disqualify the other person from even having an opinion. Which is why you get stuff like calling someone a tourist for liking Breath of the Wild. They didn't really experience Zelda the right way because their first one happened to be a more recent game. Or calling someone a LARPer because they don't have the right opinions on it, so they're not a real fan, they're just pretending to be one. None of that actually proves anything about the game being good or bad. It's just a way of being condescending while pretending you're making an argument, and I just don't get what it's supposed to accomplish. Like, does calling a stranger a tourist make your favorite game better? Does it make you feel smarter for 10 seconds? Does it make you feel like a bigger fan? Because that's about all it does. It doesn't change anyone's mind. It's just making the person doing it look like they care more about winning than the actual series. And it's the kind of thing that makes newer fans not want to engage with the community at all, which is the opposite of what you think someone who loves the series would actually want. And it's not just those two words either. That's just where it usually starts. From there you get the casual stuff like, did you even finish the game? Or the name of a very specific piece of trivia that most people wouldn't know kind of energy, where instead of responding to what someone actually said about the game, you're trying to catch them failing with some kind of test to prove they're allowed to have an opinion in the first place. Which, even if someone generally hasn't played as much of the game as you have, it doesn't actually disqualify their opinion about the parts they did experience. You're allowed to have a take on a series that you didn't play every single game of. And while I've been seeing this for a long time, I'm seeing it even more now with the Ocarina of Time remake being announced. People have a lot of strong opinions on this. Some are excited, some are skeptical, some are just kind of annoyed it's happening at all instead of a new game. And that's fine, that can be a normal reaction to have. But what's not fine is watching people take that and turn it into a personal attack on who's ever excited or whoever isn't looking forward to it. Like being hyped for the remake or not caring about it affects someone else. Whether you like it or not, this remake is happening. And if you don't want to support it, if you don't care about it, simply just don't buy it. If you are excited for it, then it shouldn't matter if someone else on the internet is telling you to not be excited for it. I think people just have too much free time and just care too much about this. Now, caring about a series you love is obviously completely normal. I love the Zelda series. It's one of my favorite series in gaming, and I care a lot about it, but I don't care what other people think about it. I personally love Ocarina of Time. I love Tears of the Kingdom. I love almost every Zelda game. But if someone comes to me and says, I don't like Ocarina of Time, why does that affect my enjoyment of it? I could say, why do you feel that way? And get their perspective. And it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them, but I'm not getting angry about it. I'm not writing an essay about how they're wrong and I'm right. Because it doesn't matter to me, and it shouldn't matter to you either. Have discussions all you want to try and understand someone's perspective, but the moment that you actually start feeling anger, or you start feeling the need to put someone down, that says a lot more about you than the other person who just enjoys a game differently, or doesn't enjoy a game as much as you. I don't think this video will change anything. I'm sure there'll be comments with people saying how they have to protect the series because Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the worst games ever made, and it's completely ruined the series. And if you feel that way, you're entitled to feel that way, but don't take your anger out on people who genuinely had a great time with this. Because if you are a grown adult acting this way on the internet, I'm genuinely curious, what are you trying to accomplish? And the last point I want to bring up is when people try to act like others are crazy for having different opinions. Something I see all the time in different ranking videos is when someone says, well, this video certainly has opinions, and they're meaning it in like a condescending, snarky way, where they're saying that this person's opinions are all crazy. At least that's how a lot of these comments are written. Or they'll just flat out say something like, this list is terrible, how can you like these games? And like I mentioned earlier in the video, someone could easily come back at them and say, I feel the same way about your picks, because there's no winning here. You can't try to win an argument on something that's completely subjective, and just because something doesn't make sense to you, doesn't mean it can't make sense to anyone else. Because I guarantee the way you feel about another Zelda game, like let's say you love that game, you think it's flawless, I guarantee someone else could say the same thing to you, that you're crazy for thinking that game is perfect. And these aren't good discussions to have. This isn't a good way to engage about games you love. If someone disagrees with you a lot, if someone has the polar opposite opinions of you, try to understand where they're coming from and give your own perspective, and then just leave it at that. Life is stressful enough as it is, and if you're choosing to get stressed over just stupid topics like this, it's almost like you just want to get into arguments. Like this is how you want to be spending your time. Anyway, that's just my take on all of this. I don't care what your favorite Zelda game is, if you're looking forward to the Ocarina of Time remake or not. Feel the way you want to feel, because at the end of the day, someone saying something about a game you like should not affect your enjoyment of it. Now be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.